Hello and welcome to this small intermediate project. Now, about a week ago, I got a call from a company that wanted to give me a challenge that I was to complete in 1 week. Today is the end of that week. Now, I must regrettably inform that I have been unable to complete the challenge because I simply don't know enough about the subject to adequately do it in this short amount of time. However, I wanted to make this small video in order to show off a bit on how I approached the project as well as how far I got. Just so that it's not, completely wasted. The basic challenge was to create a small customer database. And I was thinking that should be doable for someone like me who knows nothing about databases, who has never worked with Node.js, who has a barely passable idea of how to use JavaScript, who doesn't know what Express is, who doesn't know what MongoDB was, or what Mongoose was, and had no idea about this particular framework. Though I ended up using it anyway, so I do a little bit now. Now, the system obviously has a whole bunch of requirements that they would like all of the features that it should have. Basically, you should be able to register yourself as a user with a password to create some security for the database, as well as a bunch of commands once you are inside the database that allows you to create a new customer with their name, email, phone number, list all of the customers, and then of course search through all the customers and find the things. Find which one you want based on this particular stuff. This essentially can be sorted down to a sorting algorithm, which I am somewhat rusty to. They also mentioned this particular hint, which is a token. I have no idea what that is, but I am very much assuming that it has something to do with the fact that you can store the information, and then most likely you can authenticate it somewhere else. So an external authentication, which would make sense in the term of security. But again, I don't know much about security either. So I am pretty much as green as they come in terms of this particular assignment. But that didn't stop me from giving it a go regardless. So I quickly did my best at trying to figure out what all of these things was, trying to improve them slightly, or at least, see what I wanted to add to them, sort of. Like if you want to list it, for example, add alphabetical. That would make sense to make it easier to understand that list. Otherwise, you could just make a horrible list that would be annoying to sort through. When you would search and list customers, you would also most likely add some sorting mechanism in it, and small stuff like that. Now, given the fact that I don't really know, or I didn't really know anything about this at all, I figured the easiest way would be to find a tutorial to make me install all of these things as quickly as possible without error, as well as take me through the very basic stuff so that I might be able to complete this relatively simple system from my immediate judgment. Now, granted, true, this might have been the point where I slightly underestimated the task and didn't really know just how much there is actually behind the scene when it comes to it. But that being said, the basic gist of it is the company uses these for, and searching a little bit around, I realized that the way to build this database client system would be to have the client contact a server which contains the database through the additional package of Mongoose to make it easier to connect to the MongoDB database. And this is what I have tried to make using the tutorial I found for it. So let's go into it. See if it's smart enough to open the project directly. Go away. Welcome guide. Okay, so this is the entire test project, which essentially starts with the fact that you add this particular JSON file to it, where you add both Mongoose as well as Mocha or Mocha, I don't know which is it called. Doesn't really matter either. And in here, this particular project essentially allows you to contact the database. So cmd, let's go to the so we start by going in here and running the let's see, how can I do this quickest? Oh wait, my mistake. I'm not the most sneaky when it comes to these. There we go. So first off, I managed to successfully install MongoDB and use the database system for it, which essentially functions like this. Now I'm just running it on my local system, and which can be seen blah 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 somewhere in here. Yeah, this is bound to localhost so that I could test it on myself. The idea with that was I'm not quite sure that I can send it all the way, like make it work on the internet, because I really don't know much about it. So if I can make it work on just my own service to begin with, it's a good start. Kind of a choice, but it's also the default setting. Anyways, now this is running, so the database is up and can now be contacted. This is then what this particular project does. So you open another CMD, which is not the most smart way to do it, but then we go into our test project. And in this, we have already installed Node.js in order to ensure that we can use some of the functions from it. So we go Node, and I think it is connection. It's basically, I found out that basically it means that we can run JavaScript from this. I think that's what it does. Don't kill me if it isn't. And Dar she blows means that the connection is established to the database. This allows us, or at least it should allow us, to now contact it. As can be seen in here, basically what we do is if there is no database, we create it, and if it is already there, we use it. That's what this particular code does. It's the bare, like, my minimum understanding of how Mongoose does is that it takes care of all of these smaller problems for us. So it just automatically blows. And then I also have a small error handling just in case that it's going bad. Next step is then the final step that I reached to, because the tutorial that I used were not fault-free, as it turns out, which is a bit unfortunate. And now we go in here. Oh, oops. I did it again. Now the guy did use a command prompt editor called Commander, which I decided to not use because I couldn't install it correctly. It was very annoying. But I can see the advantage now, given the very limited functions of the basic command prompt. Okay, so let's see. What we can do now is that because I've set up this particular test server or test folder, it basically allows me to run these tests that are in here. The idea with this thing is that since the basic idea was that this model called customer should be able to be exported as a schema, which is basically how the data should be stored. So here we have our very, very basic customer, which can have a name, a string, and a number. And that's basically what we need from the task itself, right? The fact that they can have these three. So, however, this particular function apparently doesn't work. So I had to shove it in here, which is very annoying, and I didn't really want to do that, but that was one of the problems in the tutorial that I found. Now here I'm trying to create simply a single person and add that, save it to the database. But given my limited knowledge of JavaScript, this particular function is the thing that is supposed to tell us when we stop, when the thing has been saved. Because the idea is that you make this function, so you create this and then you save it, but then you wait and make sure that you can figure out, like, you don't know how long it takes for it to save it. So we're waiting until we are sure that it's done, until we end the whole thing. And this particular function, which is what the guy uses, is supposed to essentially assert that if the customer is a new, which it will supposedly only do when it is actually new, is false, then it will stop. However, this never occurs. So we end up with a problem where it times out every single time. And this is the point where I'm like, okay, I've already installed all of these things, trying to make all of it work, building all of these relatively simple things by themselves, but given the fact that I don't know much about them, it just becomes, oh, how do I solve this in this given time frame? Hoop-de-dur. But we can still run it just for a good measure, which also shows off that we know a little bit about the NPM, which they actually mention that they want us to use, right? The suggested framework is exactly NPM. So, I think it's just run test, actually. Yes, saving records, and it fails. Now, if I could get this to work, I could then build basically the saving part of it, which allows you to create a customer. Then I can make the list command, and then I can make the next command, and then I can give up on the next point where I need to figure out how to make the client system. However, this is the extent of what I could make during this week. I acute it to mostly my limited knowledge of the whole system, but also my working conditions haven't been entirely perfect. But excuses don't really matter, so there you go. Yeah, that's about it. Hopefully you enjoyed it a little bit, and if not, well, the process has been documented, if nothing else. Have a nice day.